Hi, this is Joy at Pine Quilt Shop. We are going to talk about cutting fabric for borders and help you figure out how much you need to purchase if you want to add borders to a quilt. The quilt I have in front of me is one of my favorite patterns. It's a pattern called Hodgepodge. It is a borderless quilt. Very easy to add borders to a quilt like this if you want to make it bigger. So let's take a look at what our sizes are on the rectangular throw. So it is 60 by 72 inches. So if you are going to add borders to this quilt, you will typically go ahead and add your side borders first and then your top and bottom borders. So it was 60 by 72 inches. So you have 72 inches of side border that you need to plan for when you purchase your fabric. So the fabric I have in front of me is a fun print. It's a great border fabric. It's not a directional print, and this is one that can easily be cut with a fabric. So the first thing that you need to decide is, are you going to piece your seams in that border straight, or are you going to piece them at a 45-degree angle? So typically a width of fabric strip for most fabrics is going to have 42 usable inches. So if you take a 42-inch strip, sew another 42-inch strip to it with a straight seam, you will only lose a ½ inch. So you will have almost 84 inches of fabric. You'll have 83.5 after you lose that straight seam allowance, which is enough to cover that 72-inch side. If you plan though to piece your border strips together with a 45-degree angle seam, then you have to plan for the fact that you're going to lose fabric in that diagonal seam. So to account for that, you would take 42 inches for one strip of fabric, add 42 inches for the second strip of fabric, but then you need to subtract the width of your strip. So if we were going to put 7-inch finished borders on here, our fabric strips would be getting cut at 7.5 inches wide. So I would take 42 plus 42, which is 84 inches, but then I need to minus 7.5, the width of my strip, and that will give me what I would have for a actual strip of two width of fabric strips sewn together, which is 76.5 inches. Now this quilt was 72 inches long, so it's probably 72.5 at the point in time that we'd be working with it, but my 76.5 would be enough to cover it. So make sure you think about if you're doing straight or diagonal seams. If you're doing diagonal seams, you need to subtract the width of your fabric strip from every seam that you're going to make. So you can typically figure 42 inches for a width of fabric strip, but don't forget to subtract off that amount that you'll lose if you are going to sew diagonal seams. So when you're planning border strips for this quilt, I would need to plan for 2 for each side, so that would be 4 strips. And then my quilt was 60 inches, I believe. Yep, it was 60 inches. So make sure when you plan what you need for your top and bottom borders that you remember to add what you've added in those side borders. So if we were doing 60 inches plus a 7-inch finished border and a 7-inch finished border, I would add 14 inches, and I should add another half because I would have my seam allowance still there. So now I'm at 74.5 inches, and that is what my top and bottom borders would need. Now we figured before that 2 fabric strips, even with a deduction for a diagonal seam, was 76. I would manage to make it with 2 strips for my top and bottom border as well. So I would need to figure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with a fabric strips for my border fabric. So 8 times 7.5, just for the example, we're using a 7-inch finished border, 7.5 cut, and that puts me at 60 inches. So I would need to buy at least 1.75 yards of fabric to cut my border. So hopefully that helps you walk through a sample calculation that would help you figure out what you need to purchase for fabric the next time you're going to add borders to a quilt. We've done some other videos on this topic, so be sure to catch those as well, because there's a whole series of them on adding borders to your quilts.